Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren.
Ladies and gentlemen, a cordial welcome. I'm Klaus Ofner, Head of Investor Relations of Wienerberger. On behalf of the Managing Board, I'd like to welcome you most cordially to the Investor and Analyst Conference on the occasion of the presentation of the mid-year results 2015. Heimo Scheuch and Willy van Riet are going to present the most important events and results of the first half of the year, and they will then give you an outlook for the rest of the year and some guidance regarding our results. As regards questions, I would ask you, whenever you wish to put a question, to wait for the microphone, because the conference is being webcast. Mr. Scheuch. Thank you very much, Klaus. We too wish you a very good morning. Willy and myself will take you briefly through the results, and we will leave enough time for questions. Now, talking about the highlights of the first 6 months, we're quite satisfied with our results. Revenues have increased by 9% to almost 1.5 billion in a market environment characterized by quite some discrepancies. There were some markets that were weak with a lot of competition. Other markets were taking a positive development, but more about that later. Operating EBITDA increased by 34% to 181 million. That was the result, on the one hand, of price increases. We succeeded in increasing prices to cover the costs of inflation, and even beyond that, that is the result of intensive work in recent years, a repositioning of the company, innovative products, a product portfolio that allows us to increase prices even in difficult times. We also benefited from foreign exchange effects, particularly against the dollar and the British pound. And when you look at energy costs, the low energy prices helped us as well in operational terms. Nevertheless, the implementation of our optimization measures and our cost cutting measures meant that, particularly in the brick segment, we were able to offset slight volume decreases and to achieve a better result. This shows that our company is strong even in a phase of weak growth in certain markets. We were also able to increase our gross cash flow to almost 154 million, and the guidance will be increased for the full year, will be increased to 375 million. Now, talking briefly about clay building materials Europe, we were able to increase average prices thanks to our product mix and our cost-cutting measures and efficiency increases. That was sufficient to offset a slight volume decline in this business unit. Pipes and Pavers Europe, that is plastic pipes, a very good organic growth performance, particularly in Northern Europe, Norway, Sweden, and Finland. Pipelife has a strong market position there and was able to further consolidate and increase its market position. These fiber-reinforced Soluforce pipes are used in the gas and oil industry in particular. They sell very well and contributed to our results because they have a higher margin. Ceramic pipes, sewage systems, Keramo-Steinzeug developed well in the German market, which is a difficult market, and Semmelrock was operating in a slightly shrinking market in Central and Eastern Europe, but nevertheless achieved good results. North America, the market is not growing as strongly as we had originally expected. We had expected 9% growth in single-family and two-family homes, but it's only going to be 5% growth. But nevertheless, two strong messages. On the one hand, we succeeded in slightly increasing our prices. You may remember there was quite some pressure on prices in recent years, and our cost structure is leaner now, and that too has led to improved results. Willi is going to talk about one-off effects, particularly a real estate transaction that generated income in the amount of 12.5 million. So, ladies and gentlemen, I too would like to welcome you cordially. Let me give you the highlights. Revenues plus 9% to 1.4 billion. EBITDA up by 35% to 181 million. Profit after tax 21.1 million. And gross cash flow up by 54% to 153.9 million from 100 million in the first half of 2014. Now, let's take a look back to the first half of 2014. We had a very good beginning in 2014 and a reasonably good second quarter. This year, the first quarter was okay, not as good as in 2014, but it was still good, and the second quarter is significantly better, so that shows that our business is developing well. In the second quarter, revenues have grown by 13%, operating EBITDA up by 37%. In clay building materials, growth is being supported by the consolidation effect of the acquisition of Tondach, 7.7 million contribution to EBITDA, and strong growth of revenues and earnings in Great Britain, growth that is continuing. And as we already indicated at the end of last year, after a dip in the Dutch market, we are seeing a strong recovery there from a low level. So these are our performance drivers. Pipes and pavers, particularly in international project business, a very good performance in the second quarter. You may remember that the first half of 2014 was weak. First half of 2015 much stronger. This also goes for what I would call normal organic growth. So we are seeing good growth in the main markets. North America, as Heimo already said, a stable development. Certainly, there is the influence of the one-off real estate transaction. We sold a depleted clay pit for industrial purposes. This is part of a program which we launched in 2012. Our intention was by 2016 to generate 100 million cash from the sale of non-core assets. Now we are in the middle of 2015. We stand at 55 million, so there is a lot more to come. And I will come back to that in my forecast. These are things which you cannot always plan, and we can only indicate a range. But things take their time because rezoning may be necessary. You have to negotiate. You have to wait for a buyer to get his finances right. This is something you cannot always plan, but we are confident that we're going to make the 100 million by 2016. Our income statement, what's most satisfactory is the increase of the operating EBITDA margin from 10% to 12.3%. Even if I were to exclude the one-off real estate transaction, we would still be at 11.5%. So we're strong in our organic business, and we're quite happy with that. Depreciation, quite similar to 2014. What helps us here is the impairments or the impairments of 2014. We had to book an additional impairment on our assets in Russia in the amount of 10.5 million. Our best forecast was too optimistic, as it turned out, and the long-term growth rate was lowered from 2% to 1.5% by the IMF. And this is a non-cash valuation, which is only reflected in EBIT. The financial result, net interest result, is going down. This is due to the savings, which I mentioned already last year. We brought the negative carry down. We focus on financing from existing bank lines. And as regards income from investments in associates, we are now at 0. Last year it was minus 2.7. You may remember that until the middle of the year, Tondach was consolidated at equity. That resulted in the minus 2.7. Now the only business that is covered by this position is Schlagmann in Germany. The other financial result, a slight decrease. It's due to the valuation of derivatives, which has a negative impact, and then we redeemed loans, and that leads to realized exchange rate losses. So the financial result remains the same as last year, but the improvement in our net interest result will have an impact because instead of the expensive bonds we issued in the past, we now rely on bank lines. Profit before tax is 39.2 compared with 4.5 million the year before. Income taxes 18.1 million. We are in the fortunate or unfortunate situation that we are profitable in countries where there is a high tax rate and we have no losses carried forward. In the Benelux countries, the Nordic countries, those are the countries where we have always generated positive results and we are paying taxes, but we are paying taxes on a good positive result. Profit after tax 21.1 million. This is before hybrid coupon. But even if you were to deduct the hybrid coupon, that is 16 million, we would still be in the positive range. Revenue development. We have a stable volume development. Volumes have remained flat compared with the previous years. Prices have gone up by 2%. This is due to a combination of price increases and an improvement of the product mix. It's difficult to separate the two. On the one hand, we have increased our prices, but on the other hand, we have improved our product portfolio. This includes the pipe business. The pipes are higher for special pipes than for normal pipes. So we have a positive price development, a positive FX effect, 2%, and plus 5% consolidation effect from Tondach Kleinstetten. That corresponds to a contribution of 60 million. EBITDA, a very similar picture. Price development and product mix development, resulting in a contribution of plus 25 million. The volume effect is practically zero. We have an FX effect of plus 5.8 million on EBITDA. The dollar and the pound sterling exchange rate is very positive, as well as Swiss franc to a certain extent was negative as the ruble, and the Norwegian and Swiss crown, but altogether plus 5.8. Sale of real estate, 12.6 million. More than in the first half of 2015, when we sold real estate worth something like 2 to 3 million. Now we are at 15 million altogether, and this includes the one real estate transaction in the United States. Consolidation contribution 5.6 million from Tondach Kleinstetten. The first quarter a slightly negative contribution. In the second quarter a 7.7 million positive contribution that results in plus 5.6, and we lost 4 million through total cost and inflation. So 181 EBITDA. Broken down by segments. All segments made positive contributions to the result. 10.4 million from CBME Western Europe, Benelux countries and the United Kingdom in particular. CBME Eastern Europe, despite the shrinking Russian market, all other markets made positive contributions. Pipes and pavers, strong in Western Europe. That is due to good operational business in Scandinavia and Western Europe. But there is also good project business, mainly driven by the Netherlands and Scandinavia. Pipes and pavers, Eastern Europe, a positive contribution, and the North American contribution, plus 18.4, of which 12.5 is due to the real estate transaction. But the contribution net is still positive. Broken down by segment. What you can see here is a split between revenues and increase in operating EBITDA. So it's positive in all segments. Even holding and others has been able to make certain savings. And as far as the margins are concerned, significant improvement, 9% for wall. Much better than last year, 19% for roof, which is slightly lower than last year, which was 23%. That's due to Tondach, because margins are lower in Eastern Europe. Then facade, 15%. We excluded one part from the United States in order to give a realistic picture. Pavers plus 9% and pipes 11%. So the margins are good, and we hope we will be able to further increase our margins, particularly in wall products. Cash flow development, a very satisfactory development. 50 million more gross cash flow, an increase from 100 to 153. Working capital is eating up most of this improvement, but it's within the framework of the normal development of business. In the first half, we were selling more, which means that receivables are higher, which will be converted into cash as customers pay, and our stocks have been built up because revenues are increasing. As you know, we are a seasonal business. We are building up working capital until June or July, and then we are using up our stocks. And this is entirely within the normal framework, and working capital will again be brought down to 20-21% of revenues. Normal CapEx, similar to last year. We are still being cautious when it comes to spending money. Divestments and others, plus 4.5 million. So we have a negative free cash flow of 123.6 million, smaller growth CapEx, 5.2 million dividend and hybrid coupon. You know that although we slightly increased our dividend compared with 2014, as regards the hybrid coupon, in the conversion in 2014, we made a prepayment, and this is why we are paying out 22 million cash out instead of the 32 million, which we usually pay out. Our net debt corresponds to the cash flow. Dividend slightly increased. Total investments plus 60 million. Working capital plus 220 million. Altogether 785 million. When you compare net debt with end of June 2014, Tondach was consolidated in the second half of 2014, which cost us 110 million. That increased our debt. And bearing that in mind, you can see that we are very strong, financially speaking. So we have a good liquidity, a strong liquidity, and a balanced financing structure. We do have a headroom of undrawn lines of 312 million. In August, we redeemed the bond from our bank lines, and we are confident we can make do with our cash in the second half of the year. As for the rest, maturities are very low. 2016, 100 million, that is almost nothing. The hybrid, 2017, well, we'll let you know as usual what we intend to do. I don't want to anticipate that. And then the drawn credit lines, 2019. As you can see on this diagram, this is our RCF credit line, which is on our balance sheet up to 2019. Normally, drawn lines are shown on a short-term basis, but this is really long-term secured liquidity. Treasury ratios, net debt to operating EBITDA, 2.2. This includes a 220 million working capital swing. It may go up to 300 million. The Tondach transaction was not yet included end of June 2014, so you can see the improvement very well. And the operating EBITDA to interest result has also been strongly improved. So the target for the end of the year is maximum 2.5 times, but it will probably be less. It will be 2 times. And with this, I hand over to Heimo.
Okay, Willi, then.
Thank you very much, Willi. I suggest that we take a detailed look at the development on individual markets and in the individual segments. Clay building materials, here we distinguish between Western and Eastern Europe. Western Europe shows an increase in revenues of 3% and an increase in EBITDA of 14%. In Western Europe, we have a number of highly different markets. We talked about a dynamic market in the United Kingdom. The market development in the United Kingdom was different because of the elections. There was a period prior to elections and after elections. Prior to elections, there was a lot of tension. Then there was a clear-cut decision and the introduction of a stable phase. And this meant that we did have a slight volume decrease in the first half of the year, but we now find that things are picking up again. Because of the high demand, we could increase prices. Willi also mentioned that the situation on the European continent, in the Netherlands, for instance, became more dynamic, starting from a low level, but moving in the right direction. And fortunately, this applied to all segments: one-family homes, multifamily homes, renovation, roofing, and renovation. The Belgian market is one of the most important markets. It has benefited from good economic developments in the Netherlands and the United Kingdom, but also is a dynamic market, and the situation is stable. The situation is different in France. There was a further decline, about 7% for one- and two-family homes, a clear decline starting from a low level already, and we don't see any signs of recovery in France. This holds also true for the infrastructure segment, where pipe life is active and is therefore affected by this trend. I expect there will be no changes this year, but I'm slightly hopeful for next year. The closer presidential elections, the higher the probability of an economic recovery. Anyway, this is something that we can hope for. The situation in Italy was similar. Again, a decline from an already low level, also 7%, and this is going to continue for the rest of the year, even though in Italy we find slight improvements in the regulatory environment, and there are also a few positive economic signs, but this has not yet affected the construction industry. Then a region which I find disappointing: Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. In our core segment, one- and two-family houses and renovation, development was not what we expected. So we see a downward development in new residential construction, in one- and two-family homes, and also in renovation. A colleague pointed out this morning that in Germany there is a positive trend. This is true, but it is confined to multi-story buildings, where our products are not used to a large extent. So therefore we are confronted with a trend towards urban construction in German cities and fewer one- and two-family homes. Let me move on to Eastern Europe. Here there has been a change this year. Poland already was strong last year, and it is one of the better markets this year again. One- and two-family markets and renovation have picked up. Fortunately, this is also true for relevant markets such as the Czech Republic and Hungary. Let me remind you that for 5 years there was a continuous downward trend in Hungary. Now things are picking up, even though we start from a very low level. Things are looking good for the coming years, and the same holds true for Romania and Bulgaria. Austria, as already mentioned, however, does not show this upward trend. This also applies to the renovation sector. Because of fewer subsidies and incentives, there is a downward trend. Low energy prices are another contributory factor, because it's less interesting to invest in thermal renovation. I've already pointed out we have an exposure of 2% of our revenues in Russia. We can see a decline when it comes to new residential construction and also in infrastructure. It is obvious that the Russian state does not invest in infrastructure projects, and also in the private sector there are not sufficient funds available, so we will have to expect a decline of our business activity. Let me add a few comments on southeastern Europe, Slovenia, all the way to Macedonia. Here again, the first 6 months were a bit weaker. However, we expect a more positive trend for the coming years. Of course, structures in the various countries are different, but there are initiatives regarding renovation and new construction. Pipes and pavers in Western Europe. Here we have ceramic pipes and plastic pipes. You can see the development of revenues and the increase of operating EBITDA. This is due to the fact that in Northern Europe, in the Nordic markets, and I have to emphasize this, we, of course, focus on markets in Western Europe and Norway, Sweden and Finland, markets that show different dynamics than other Western European markets. Taking the Finnish market as an example, the market is declining, but we are doing better. And this is due to the efforts of our colleagues in the plastic pipe segment. There has been a notable recovery in demand in Ireland and the Netherlands, and we could achieve higher margins there. Ceramic pipes, here our sewage pipe experts in Belgium and Germany did well, even though the market in Germany in general showed a decline. German communities tend to invest less, but we are doing well, both locally, also in exports. There are considerable exports to the Middle East, particularly to Saudi Arabia. Eastern Europe. Here we have semi-rock pavers, plastic pipes. The plastic pipe sector performed very well, considering the diversified market situation. We had very good results in Poland, Hungary and Turkey, which compensated for the earnings decline in Austria. Austria is showing a decline in the construction sector, in the infrastructure sector, due to very little investment in the public sector, and this also, of course, is due to the labor market situation and declining activities in the construction industry. From Poland all the way through Croatia, we saw very good performance, and we could also reduce costs, structural costs. North America. Here we could benefit from a recovery of residential construction, and we could also improve the cost situation, and as a result our margins increased significantly. We should bear in mind, of course, that we sold real estate in the United States, which brought a total of 12.5 million euros. Nevertheless, our colleagues in Canada and in the United States are doing a very good job in improving margins. Let's proceed to the outlook for 2015. I've already mentioned some of the results. We see that there's a growing American market, less than the 9% originally expected. We have a 5% growth in America. In Europe, we have growth in the United Kingdom and the Netherlands. Belgium is stable. Developments in France are still negative. Also, there is a decrease in Switzerland and Italy. As already mentioned, the situation in Austria and Germany, due to little public investment and also in the private sector, shows a decline. But there's a positive trend in Central and Eastern Europe, with the exception of Southeastern Europe and Russia. Many countries there have done their homework, so we expect an increasing dynamic development. I mentioned the roof tiles, which is an important sector for us, providing good margins. Our core markets did a good job in the renovation sector, because of fewer incentives from the public sector. So there is a slight downward development, but we expect that these programs, renovation programs, have been merely postponed, and there will be further investments in the years to come. Summing up, we can say that the outlook for clay building materials is as follows: good, stable or slightly positive development in our core markets. We do have a decline in France and Italy, and there will be further market declines. We can expect a stabilization in France next year. Germany is fairly weak. Russia also is going to show a slight decline in the second half of the year. However, in all our markets, we succeeded in raising the prices, which I think is a very strong message. And as a result of research and development in the production sector, we could achieve improvements of cost structure and increase our margins. Pipes and pavers in northern markets and Eastern Europe, we expect higher volumes, as already mentioned. In the first half of the year, there was a shortage of raw materials, granulate, but we could manage the situation adequately, so we could meet all customers' demands as a result of our procurement strategy, and we could also pass on increased raw material prices to our customers. This was the result of a very good management and a good crisis management during the first half of the year. And in the second half of the year, these bottlenecks will no longer exist. The situation for ceramic pipes is similar. Exports, increasing exports to the Middle East contribute to our earnings improvement. The situation in North America is similar. We expect further growth. The challenge regarding prices will continue to exist. So signs are positive. All this, of course, means that we raised our expectations or our outlook based on our performance in the first half of the year, and as Willy pointed out, also, which was also due to the sale of real estate. We have a 100 million program to sell off real estate. We are making good progress. Of course, it's not possible to come up with a precise timing of these sales, but so far we already have a 20 million contribution, and we will hopefully conclude more sales in the second half of the year. So we have raised the outlook for operating group EBITDA from 350 to 375 million. So Wienerberger is showing growth, even though we do have different market developments. We expect price increases by about 2%, cost inflation 1% for the entire group. Depreciation about 220 million. Net interest result 40 million, as Willy pointed out. And he also said that working capital in the second half of the year will go down significantly, so we will stand at about 20% by the end of the year. Normal capex about 140 million. These are all the normal investments, including upgrades, including technological renewals. We also have 10 million growth capex. This means that we will do away with capacity bottlenecks. And this will then be reflected in the individual segments that I've mentioned. So this will contribute to our investments. So this is how we see the outlook. It's in line with our expectations. Of course, there will always be some scope for maneuver, but let me make it clear, we still have hard work ahead of us in the second half of the year. We did have a very mild winter in 2014, let's not forget that. So building activities continued until after Christmas. So Wienerberger and the two of us still have a lot of work ahead of us. Thank you very much for your attention, and Willy and myself, of course, are available for questions.
Ihre Fragen?
Ladies and gentlemen, you are now welcome to put questions. Well, as regards your outlook and your expectations, cost inflation is lower. Energy prices are lower, but price increases are expected to be a full percentage point higher. Isn't your outlook a bit too cautious when you look at the adjusted EBITDA, which is only 12 million higher? Well, it sounds good, but we have to work at it. As Heimo said, we had an excellent fourth quarter 2014. We were working until Christmas. The price increases, we think we can stabilize them, but it's a job yet to be done. As regards the cost reductions, we benefited to a certain extent from lower energy prices, but this was mainly in the first quarter. When you compare the second quarter or the second half of 2014 with the second half of 2015, the price reduction was already going on. So like for like, it's going to be more difficult. And if it's more, well, it will be more, but let's be realistic. We live in an age of great volatility. We can't expect everything to go smoothly. A lot of thought has gone into this forecast, and it will take a lot of hard work to reach these targets. Now, a word about project business. Our order book for project business was full in 2014. As regards the Soluforce pipes, our order book is full for the full year, but as regards the large diameter, the large length, large diameter pipes, we still need a couple of more orders, and as long as these orders haven't come in, we can't give the corresponding guidance. Well, you may have left some headroom as regards prices. I could imagine now that the shortage of raw material is over and raw material prices are going down as well as energy prices, that might lead to some pressure on prices because the cost situation is also improving with your competitors. And another point, international project business. You mentioned the oil and gas industry because it's certainly the most important sector for these high-margin products. Oil and gas prices are very low right now. It's still a business that can be planned rather well, but don't you think that incoming orders will decline? Our exposure is very low. You can't compare us with suppliers, but I would say that these special pipes are important in substitution business. These are orders which we are getting because other pipes cannot be used there. And to a growing extent, customers are testing such pipes. And when we are talking about the Near East, if the products are being used in the United Arab Emirates, they will also be used in Kuwait and elsewhere. And we have a chance of achieving a certain amount of organic growth because these new products are being introduced. But of course, you're right. When orders come in, they may be postponed, and we can't always time that fully. As far as the roof markets are concerned, roof tiles are our most profitable business, and if certain markets are declining, you have to bear that in mind. It's not an alarming situation, but we have to bear it in mind and keep an eye on it. A final question. 15 million were contributed to the results through real estate sales. What was the book value of the real estate? Very low. One was almost zero. That was a depleted clay pit, and the others were also very low. It's a single-digit million figure, so a very low book value. So you're planning for another 55 million sales proceeds. So how much do you expect from the 55 million in terms of contribution to the result? Now, it's only 45 because 55 have already been generated, so it's going to be another 45 plus minus 10 million. Our guidance always was that for our non-core assets, about half have already been taken care of. So there will be another 45 million or so contribution to the result. Thank you. a question regarding developments in the UK. You said that volumes were stable in the fourth quarter in the pre-election period. Nevertheless, you expect significant volume growth for the second half of the year. That would imply a very strong second half of the year. Do you think that prices will go up as well? If I remember correctly, you decided last year to restart 2 mothballed plants. Could you give us an update as far as capacity utilization is concerned? And what do you expect in the UK for 2016? There was the Help to Buy program, which was launched by the government, which was had quite a stimulating effect. Can you see similar developments coming up in other markets in Europe, particularly with a view to weaknesses in the roof tile segment? We know that there is a demand for housing. Do you think that governments will do something in terms of subsidizing housing? Now, let me start with the last part of your question. Unfortunately, even if you try to engage in a reasonable discussion with government representatives in Austria as well as in other European countries, this is not very well received by government representatives. They don't respond well, although we should take the issue very seriously, particularly considering the current situation. Speaking in political terms, what I can see is rigidity, reaction, but not action. There would be simple mechanisms, and they've been communicated not only by ourselves, but also by building industry associations. You could do a lot in the field of renovation if the tax rates were lower. This is a pan-European issue. I'm only referring to wage dumping, to the shadow economy, which could easily be brought up to the level of the official economy. Much more focus should be put on quality of work, on craftsmanship. This is an issue for Belgium, the Netherlands, the United Kingdom, and Austria. There is an interest in high-quality workmanship. Those are all issues that can be resolved. It's not so difficult at all, but everybody is using federalism as a pretext, as an excuse. We're facing major issues which are blocking Europe for the time being. A lot could be done in the construction industry that would benefit the labor market. Very simple measures would stimulate investments, but unfortunately, bureaucracy is still flourishing, not only in Austria, but also in France, in Italy, in Great Britain. What I see is a lack of commitment on the part of decision makers in the administration and at the political level. At Wienerberger, we launched a program which is currently being implemented in Denmark and the Netherlands. We are training migrants. We are training them as bricklayers, or we involve them in the construction of homes in poor countries so that they are being trained. Of course, this is only a minor thing, but it could help a great deal if it were done on a larger scale. For the time being, I can't see any initiatives in Europe. A lot is being discussed everywhere, including in Austria, but very little is materializing. You asked about the UK in particular. We have a very specific situation there. We are a provider who can also act as a subcontractor. We have an improving Dutch market, and capacity can be used in the United Kingdom. As far as prices go, we succeeded in increasing prices, and we are satisfied with that. We can't expect much more, at least not for the time being. So, first of all, we need to use the new capacity that is now available in the market to meet market demand. And for this year, we are very satisfied with our growth figures, and we'll have to wait and see what's going to happen next year. A question about clay building materials in Eastern Europe. You mentioned higher volumes, and the map showed that in Hungary, Bulgaria, Romania, we can see a positive development, but there is still quite some pressure on prices. Do you expect a change in the coming quarters? Do you think that prices will go up again? And as to competitors, is it the big players or is it local competitors that exercise pressure on prices? Well, they're all local players. There are no big players in the region. And you mentioned Hungary as an example. We started from a very low level, and a 10% increase sounds great, but in reality it's not that much yet in economic terms. So as soon as things are getting better, everybody is trying to sell their products, and that has an impact on the price situation, which is still quite challenging. It's not a price war, but it's a confrontation which we face up to. We are the biggest provider in the region, and through our sales performance, we have to be able to offset that pressure. Do we expect a relaxation? Well, not in the coming quarters. What we need is a sustainable trend in Hungary, for example, over a year or so. And only then will we be able to take measures as far as prices are concerned. But I wouldn't want to commit myself. Let's wait and see what happens. There is moderate growth, and let's hope that it continues. A question about North America. Of course, the exchange rate situation helps. Well, how much is accounted for by currency effects on the EBITDA front and the currency front? Well, without it would be 4.6 in terms of EBITDA if the currency effects are included, 4.6 instead of 2.2. And finally, a word about markets like France. Clay blocks have been gaining market shares in France, taking away market shares from clay blocks. Is that trend continuing, or are there other building materials that are making life difficult for you? No, we still see a positive trend in France. We're doing quite well in terms of market shares, also with roof tiles. But in general, there is low demand, but the trend is right. You said that the tax rate was higher for the tax ratio was higher for the first half of the year. What do you expect for the full year? I never calculate a tax ratio for the full year because I can't be sure whether the same countries are going to contribute the same amount. So we expect the amount of tax paid to be twice as high for the full year as it is for the half year. We are a good corporate citizen and we pay our taxes. Any further questions? One very quick question on volumes. Volumes were stable, you said. They must have been positive in the second quarter. How positive were they? Slightly positive. 2% approximately? I'm afraid I can't tell you. I would have to guess, and I refuse to guess. Thank you. So, thank you very much for your interest today. I'd like to invite you to our Capital Markets Day. On the 3rd of September, we are going to be in the Netherlands and give an overview of the plastic pipe business and the brick business in the Netherlands. The managing board will be present for a strategy update and also for an update of our figures. If you want to register for that or if you require additional information, please contact Wienerberger's Investor Relations team. Thank you very much for having joined us today.